LLCs, do you need one? When do you need one? Which one do you need? There's Wyoming LLCs, or do you need one in the home state that you work in? Foreign LLCs? Maybe you should have a corporation. I don't know. A lot of questions about what type you should have and how you should form it. Should you use a great big company that's going to charge you a lot of money? Should you buy a course and do it yourself? A lot of questions lately about LLCs. And we're going to get those questions answered today on the Sub2Deals Show. Hey, Sub2ers, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Sub2Deals Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Today, our topic is LLCs. We may talk a little bit about corporations, how you should form them, should you form them, when should you form them, and the things to watch out for when you do. To help me today, talk to you guys about this and answer all your questions, we've got our buddy Bill Walston here. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Everybody that's watched the show or followed the podcast has met Bill already. Not much I can say about Bill. We were talking about this before we got started. Bill's been investing since the beginning of time and is recognized as a master of all things tax and entity related. Lease options, I think, are a specialty. I think he does pretty much everything. But Bill, tell everybody that hasn't met you a little bit about you and what you do.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me, William. It's a pleasure to be here. I like your new little intro there, all the little pictures and stuff. I've not seen that yet. Kudos.
Thanks.
All right. So for those of you who do not know me, I have been investing for a long time. Been at this business. I started out as a CPA in another lifetime. I call myself a reformed CPA now. Still hold that license. Never want to give that up, but I do not formally practice. I do more tax strategy now than anything else. So I don't put the numbers on the paper. Gave that up a while ago, but I help real estate investors close more deals and make more money and keep more of that money that they earn with proper tax strategies. So that's my thing now.
Keeping money. That's what we want to do. We don't want to have to give it all away. Gosh, you work too hard for it, don't we?
Oh, Lord, you know I'm tight as a tick, buddy, so I'm not going to give any more than I have to.
There you go. You squeeze.
You tell Jody can add that to her dictionary.
Tight as a tick, yeah, and squeezing a quarter till the eagle squawks.
That's exactly right.
So there's a couple of them, a couple of new ones for her to pick on me about. She really doesn't pick on me. A lot of people watch the videos we do about learning Yankee talk, and they think she picks on me, but she really doesn't. We're just having a good time. So, Bill, gosh, what is the deal right now with LLCs? Every influencer out there, every Facebook ad in your feed, every email that you open, every influencer wants you to run to one of these big companies, form an LLC, pay a couple of grand for it to start one. If you're a beginning investor, you need one right now.
Yeah, okay. Right. Okay. Man, I don't know. When I look at things like that, I'm thinking, okay, there's some money out there and somebody's getting a piece of something, right? Because something like that, they got an agenda of some type. I swear I don't know what it is. Are LLCs important to your business? They absolutely are. Do I think everybody needs an LLC for their business? I absolutely do. Do you need to have one before you start investing? Absolutely not. Okay. It doesn't matter if the first few deals are in your own name. You don't have to have an LLC to get started in investing. Now, once you get in, you get serious about it. Yes, I think you need to have an LLC of some type. It is my favorite entity. It's the easiest one to work with as an investor, but you can't get so enamored with having an LLC that you don't get anything done. Okay. One of my favorite stories, true story, as nearly all of them are. Okay. I had a client who we started working together. She set some goals, right? There were some specific things she needed to do, like making offers, getting a lead list, stuff like that, before we had our next call. Okay. 2 weeks go by, still haven't heard anything from her. 3 weeks go by, haven't heard anything from her. So I reach out and I say, hey, what's going on? You know, you had this stuff you needed to get done. You wanted to make some offers on some properties. I said, how many offers have you made? None. Zero. Well, what's the problem? I couldn't decide what to name my LLC. Okay. That's what happens when you start concentrating on all this irrelevant stuff. So to answer the question as where's it all coming from? I really have no idea. The only thing I can think of is that there are a lot of people who push these for both asset protection, right, and business structure. I used to hear people say, oh yeah, well, I need an LLC to cover my assets. Well, how many properties do you own? Well, I don't own any. I said, okay, what assets are you trying to cover? Don't have any assets, you don't need asset protection, if you know what I mean, right?
Exactly.
So I think we put the cart before the horse in a lot of cases. So I don't think either of us are trying to minimize the fact that an LLC is an excellent structure, and we both, I think everybody needs one at some point in their business, but you can have it before you get the business started.
Right. That's what I tell investors, especially new students that come in and ask about an LLC or a corporation or any of that stuff. I said, listen, your business structure is important, but if you have, just as you said, if you haven't bought a house yet, you need to be focused on ways to generate leads, ways to find sellers, ways to buy houses. You need to be focusing on income generation, lead generation. Before you worry about asset protection. And I'm a good example of that. I owned 4 properties before I ever formed my first LLC.
Right. I had, well, because my background is what it is, when I bought a property, I had an LLC in place, right? But I didn't form it until like a week before closing, right? That's when I got it, because it doesn't take months and months to get it done. Okay.
Right.
So we're not saying that you shouldn't have one, but you certainly don't need it at the very beginning. 4 properties is not a bad deal, because that way that you're going to be investing and have a reason for having that LLC. I see too many times that people set up an LLC. I'm going to be a real estate investor, never do a deal. Right. So there you've got an LLC that you paid for. Do you know how much that would have cost to set up in California, exclusive of an attorney setting it up? If you get an attorney to do it, $800 to form an LLC. And you wasted $800. You did a deal.
And never bought a house. That's absolutely right. And that was another thing. They vary so much state to state. I know, just the filing fees. Some states it's very little, $50, and then some you're talking about California. These renewal fees every year, they're extremely high.
Right.
So that makes a big difference too. Now, as a beginning investor, and we hear differences in that, and all of this is subject to a lot of different things about different investors. In other words, if you have a W-2 job, then your entity structure may be a little bit different, how you set things up, what you do. But let's take the basic brand new investor. They just bought a house last week, but they're actually an action taker, and they're out there trying to do the stuff in the course. At what point, I think we're both in agreement, they need to have a couple of properties before they really worry about an LLC.
Right.
But they form that LLC. What's your recommendation on that? Do you think they should use a service? Should they use a local tax person? How should they think about getting that set up?
Well, I think it varies from person to person, right? It's kind of an individual decision. Some don't want to take the time to learn to do it themselves. I think it's okay to have an attorney set it up for them. Local attorneys, you can find out how much it's going to cost for them. I know some attorneys who set up LLCs from start to finish, and it's like $1,200 for the whole thing.
Mhm.
Right. I know people who do it themselves. I mean, it's very easy to go to the Secretary of State's office, fill out the articles of organization, hit pay, and submit your
Mhm.
credit card info. And for
Right.
all practical purposes, you have an LLC. Okay.
Right.
What a lot of people, though, fail to remember is that's not where it stops.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than that. So I think you can run the gamut of that. Would I go to any of these high priced, people who are selling LLCs? Anybody who's trying to sell you an LLC service has got some
Mhm.
type of agenda. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to
Right.
go with that.
I agree. I know when I got started, you actually had to form a corporation or an LLC, you had to actually manually print the documents, fill them out, mail them in, wait, do
Yep.
that stuff. You
Yep.
had to do a little bit of research to make sure the name was acceptable and didn't, it wasn't too close to someone else's. Now is literally 3 or 4 clicks and you've got an LLC,
And
you
you've
print
got
your
an LLC.
documents.
And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, in some states, 3 or 4 clicks, you got a corporation. It's that
Right.
easy. And some
Yeah.
states used to require that you had an attorney sign it.
hmm
First ones ever formed in South Carolina, the articles of in court. Now, this was a corporation, right? Articles of incorporation had to be signed by an attorney.
hmm
Okay, not that way anymore. And to be honest, I think most people are capable
hmm
of going to the Secretary of State's site, setting up their LLC, answering the questions, submitting the LLC, and they're perfectly okay.
hmm
Okay,
Right.
if they will continue on and carry on the stuff that you know makes the LLC functionable and not
Right.
leave it open to piercing by
hmm
the state or plaintiff attorneys or what
Right.
have you.
Right.
Uh, there are sometimes you want to go to a website in a different state, right? And you got to get a registered agent in that state. We can talk about a lot of that later in different conversations, but you can still do it online.
hmm
And so I am of the opinion if you have done a little research on your own, and know a bit about like name search and making sure that you know the difference between a manager membered and a member managed uh, LLC, then you're perfectly fine to set it up yourself.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about that for just a minute. Then I know there are different types of LLCs, and again, let's base this on a new beginning investor,
Mhm.
someone who has just learned. Maybe they've done a couple of deals, they've got a couple of houses. Now they've got assets to actually protect. They're trying to make a decision on how to form that LLC. So, what do you think they should start out with, and why?
Generally, most people are going to start out with a single member LLC. Period. It's just going to be, and they're going to go to default. So what a lot of people think is when you set up the LLC, all the things, everything about the taxes and everything else is determined on that articles of organization that you set up, and it's not. Okay. The only thing that an article of organization does is it sets the structure, right? And your LLC is going to be a single member LLC. It's going to be a multi-member LLC. And an LLC has a default tax position. So if you're in business by yourself, buying properties on your own, what you would probably do is set up a single member LLC at at the state level. Okay. And then when you start working that LLC, you have two options since it's single member. You can either have that LLC elect to be taxed as a sole proprietorship or taxed as a corporation, one or the other. And somebody says, "Oh, well, don't I have to set it up as a corporation to start with?" No, you don't. That's just a tax election with an LLC, right? So I think most people, if they're working on their own, they would just choose single member LLC. That would be their default, and they would just set it up at the state, answering the question. Sometimes it'll ask who the members are, and you have to list member names. And by the way, if you can do it, I would always be the organizer of the LLC. Okay, I would not form an LLC as the member. Now, this is by state. All right, I know in Tennessee, North Carolina, the states that I do a lot of business in, they don't ask whether you are you don't have to be a member to set up the LLC. You can be what's called the organizer of that LLC, right? And so you set it up as the organizer, and as far as the state is concerned, that LLC is valid. It's set up, it exists, and it can start being used. The name of the LLC can start being used in purchase contracts, anything like that. So for all practical purposes, that the entity exists.
Right. Okay.
And I would just be single member.
And setting up an LLC is a lot like, well, the other things that you have to do to really make that LLC valid. I mean, as you said, a few clicks, you're an organizer, you have an LLC as far as the state's concerned.
Correct.
But there are some things that have to be done behind the scenes to keep it safe, to actually let it protect
and
your
to keep it
assets.
safe. And not only that, in order to be able to put it in a position to do business. Right. So first you form your LLC. Once you've got that done, then you apply for the EIN number. You can get that online. That's your tax identification number. Sometimes it's called a TIN, other times it's called an EIN, right? Same thing. Tax identification number, employer identification number. You can apply for that online as well. Now, if you get an attorney to set up your LLC for you, most of the time they will apply for the EIN. Okay. There are online services that will set up the LLC. That's the thing. You don't have to go to these high expensive places. You can just say how to form an LLC. And there are companies that you can go through, still online, but you can go through those particular companies, and they have packages, right? And they'll do a package that has just the LLC. They'll do a package that has, okay, we'll do the LLC for you. We'll do the articles of organization for you. We'll give you a mocked up operating agreement, and we'll get your EIN, okay? But you can do that yourself. So the second thing you would do is you would get an EIN number, an identification number. That's applied for through the IRS online. Okay. And then third, you're going to want to set up your bank account. Okay. And so the third thing you would do is go down to a local bank. You tell them that you want to set up a bank account in the name of your LLC. They will ask for two things, interestingly enough: copy of your articles of organization and a copy of your EIN letter that comes from Internal Revenue Service. So the thing that you did first step, second step, you would have with your bank.
Right. Okay. So if we're going through step by step on how a new investor would set this thing up, and they're setting it up, they didn't hire a service to do it. They would form their LLC online.
Yep.
Okay. At that time, they should go ahead and do the articles of organization.
Yeah, the articles of organization are formed automatically.
Right.
Okay. So when you answer these questions, the state generates articles of organization, and they will send you a copy, a PDF form usually, of the articles of organization. Now, what they do not send you is the operating agreement.
Right.
Right. Okay. And, I told you to go ahead and get a bank account. Some banks want a copy of the operating agreement. Not all of them. Some do, but not all. Most of them will just be happy with the articles of organization and the EIN number.
Okay. All right. So you've set this thing up online. You've applied for your EIN number. And now generally when you do that online, you can go ahead and print that off too. They're going to give you that EIN number. So you're going to have that. So you can literally the same day, unless you're working with a bank that wants the operating agreement and you haven't done that yet, you can go right down to the bank, within the hour, and set up your bank account.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. All right. So what should be their next step
after that? If they do not already have an operating agreement, they should get one. Okay. Need to have I think every LLC should have an operating agreement. And everybody goes, but Bill, my state doesn't require an operating agreement. True. Absolutely true. But wait till the IRS hauls your ass in for an audit. First thing they're going to ask for is a copy of your operating agreement.
Right.
Okay. If you try to borrow money with business credit, okay,
Mhm.
not your personal credit, something like that.
Right.
Lender's going to ask for a copy of your operating agreement. We don't always like to give that stuff out, but we ought to have it anyway, right? So
Mhm.
they're going to want to see that. I don't know how many times I've had clients who shoot me an email or get on the phone and call me and say, Bill, I tried to go down to the bank and borrow some money and they're wanting an operating agreement. What do I do? I said, well, you
Mhm.
got to give them an operating agreement. That's what you
Right.
do, right?
Mhm.
So you should have an operating agreement. All right. You can get those. That's where you may want to talk to an attorney or somebody like that to properly structure your operating agreement, or somebody like me who's been around for a while. I have these
Mhm.
services with my clients. I review their operating agreements, make sure they're in conformity and that they let you do what you think you're able to do, because the operating agreement actually controls how the LLC is supposed to be run. It decides
Right.
whether it has to have meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to have an operating agreement. Okay. So that would be the fourth thing that I would do. And then you're
Okay.
in pretty good shape. There are things
Now,
that you need to do to maintain that operating agreement, right? Or maintain that LLC from year to year. But those are pretty much the essential things that you have to
right. Okay. Now, as far as going back to that bank account,
have.
what would be your recommendation for funding that initially, so everything's done properly?
Oh, and you just transfer money from your personal account into that account as a capital contribution. That starts up your business funding.
Okay. And do you recommend a minimum amount? Because I've heard people all over them say, well, you can't start it with $50. It's got to be something significant to,
Oh, well, that's kind
a
of crap.
legitimate.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I've seen them started with $50. I've seen them started with the minimum amount to open the account.
Mhm.
Uh, Attorneys used to say, "Oh yeah, you got to put in at least $1,000 contribution." Well,
Right.
you put in $1,000 contribution. That doesn't mean it has to be done the first day,
Right.
right? So you can just open the checking account with whatever you need to open it
Mhm.
with. I don't think there's any set amount. The amount that gets attributable to your capital account in your partnership books, or I'm sorry, in your LLC's books, right? Your accounting
Mhm.
records is between you and your accountant, and it may or may not have been the total amount that went into your bank. So I don't think
Mhm.
there's a minimum deposit or anything.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But what I do say for tax purposes, all of your business income should flow through that LLC, and
Mhm.
all of your business expenses should go outside or be expensed through that LLC. You don't want to commingle funds, and you wouldn't want to do that anyway. If you're going to run a business, don't mix your business accounts with your personal accounts. Don't try to
Right.
run your business out of your personal checking.
Mhm. I got you. Okay. So really what you're saying here is basically there are 4 steps involved. You go to your Secretary of State website, you form your LLC. That will give you your articles of organization. At that time, you apply for your EIN. You set up your bank account, and then sometime during all of this, you need to put together an operating agreement. And it sounds like the operating agreement is really where that's the important part of all of this, that you may need some assistance. You want to get this set up right. Let's
Right.
say that I'm a new investor and I tried to do all this stuff on my own, which if I take a look at this, and if I'm new and I'm broke, okay, I can set up my LLC online, depending on what state I'm in,
Yep.
for somewhere between 50 and $800.
$800.
All
Yep.
right.
That's about right.
California,
Yeah.
California, once again, is the one that sticks it to you. Okay.
That's exactly right.
So I can form that. My EIN number's free. I just go to the
Absolutely.
IRS, and it's
Yep.
free because they're going to use that to get you for
Yep.
the rest of the life of the LLC. So they'll
That's
give you
right.
that one. Setting up your bank account generally doesn't cost you anything. I mean, other than the monthly fee on that bank account. And then the operating agreement is where you're going to want to get some help, whether that's someone like you who can give advice, maybe another investor who's been investing for a really long time and is a trusted person,
Yep.
something
And,
like
and,
that.
and with that, William, I will say for both of us, we ain't giving y'all legal advice.
That's right.
this
This
is
is
not legal advice. This is from our experience,
right.
what we think you ought to be
Right.
doing. Okay.
This this is purely for
Educational purposes.
Education. Well, not even educational purposes. It's for entertainment purposes.
That's right. Well, with the two
Watching
of us, that's
us,
probably,
learning how to speak Southern, that sort. That's really what
with
you
us,
should
that's
take away
probably
from
very
there.
true. And
That's right.
here's the thing, guys. All right, you can ask for help with this stuff and get experience for it. Okay.
Right.
I will tell you, people are going to charge you. I mean, I have clients all the time who come to me, and as part of my services that I provide clients, and of course they're paying me, right? I will review their documents, make sure that they are in line, that they would withstand an IRS audit. If a lender yanks them in and wants to see all their stuff, I know what you need. William knows what you need. You can ask us for that. All right. You don't have to go. And I will tell you, there's some organizations out there that say, oh yeah, pay us like thousands of dollars and we will set up your LLC and blah, blah, blah. But they're not going to help you. They're not going to be giving you any advice either. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get that from them.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend.
And you go down, you get your bank account. Now, truth be told, you can Google operating agreement and they're all over the internet.
Right.
Okay. And they're download your free operating agreement. Well, I will tell you that free operating agreement is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It really is. It's better than nothing because most of them have gone through and they look at, they glean information from the state's limited liability company laws, and almost every state has a statute on them, right? And there's info in them, and they kind of see what the structure is, and they put, boilerplate in there that would fit almost all circumstances. But that's exactly what it is. It's designed to be a generic, so it may or may not fit your specific circumstances. I've never seen a free boilerplate LLC that specifically says the purpose of this LLC is to buy, invest, and resell properties or something like that. And you want that type of specificity in most cases, right? So, start off with that. If you need to have it reviewed by somebody else, but you can get them off the internet. I don't advise it.
Right. The operating agreement is where everything comes under scrutiny if you're audited.
Correct.
So that's why it's so important. So
well, and let me just interject one thing there. That is important. That point is extremely important. That's what's scrutinized. Okay. Because I have seen cases where difference between dealer transactions and investing transactions, right? Dealer transactions are subject to self-employment tax and ordinary income tax. Investment transactions, you get capital gains.
Right.
Okay. I have seen investment transactions reclassified to dealer transactions because the operating agreement said that the purpose of the business was to buy, sell, and buy, rehab, and sell properties.
Right.
It didn't say anything about an investment intent or anything like that. And so the agent jumped on that right away and said, I'm sorry, you're not an investor. This clause right here says that you buy, you rehab, and you sell properties. Doesn't say anything about holding them for rent. Doesn't say anything about investing in anything. This is a dealer. And they were absolutely right.
Right.
They were right. So that's why an operating agreement is very important. And so I like what you said, that's what gets scrutinized.
Yeah. And that's why it's important that the person that you're taking advice from in setting your operating agreement up understands how you're doing business, because you want that thing written in the way that's going to protect you if you're audited.
Right.
Absolutely. Advantages. And in a way, the operating agreement or weakness of it is kind of like taking deductions that are outside of the realm of what we would say are normally allowed. It's not an issue until you're audited.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. It's a moot point unless you get audited. But by God, if you get audited, how simple is it to have an operating agreement that specifies what you do is deductible, and the reason and for the reasons that you do
Right.
it, right? I love to be able to go into an audit and say, nope, I'm an investor. Look here what my operating agreement
Right.
says. I buy and hold properties for appreciation and investment.
Mm-hmm.
That's my business purpose.
Right. So my point in that is if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you have totally screwed up your operating agreement or you don't even have one, don't panic. Go
We
do it
can
right
fix it.
now.
Yeah,
Go
we
fix
can
it.
fix that.
That's right. So it's not an issue at this point. If you haven't been audited, you're okay. Just finish watching the show.
Yeah.
Okay. And then go out.
Don't run, don't leave us just yet.
Yeah, don't leave it yet.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about
And
more
on
LLC
that
today.
same point, William, what I would do is you might be thinking, oh, I have an operating agreement. That's true. But does your operating agreement help you or hurt you, right, in the case of an IRS audit? So it should be reviewed. And I think operating agreements ought to be reviewed annually anyway. That's one of the things you check. Say, hey, is what I'm doing still the same thing that I said I was going to do? And because our businesses change, right? We might start off wholesaling.
Right.
I don't know why anybody would want to do that. Just kidding. Yeah, but that's what you might start off doing. So a good accountant or a good tax advisor would have told you, said, okay, you need to make sure your operating agreement says this because you're a wholesaler. Okay. And now you are doing creative finance deals. Okay. You need to amend your operating agreement so that you can do that.
Right. Okay. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to hear from our sponsors, Jason and Corey at Big Insurance. Guys, whether you're a rehabber, a landlord, a creative finance guy or gal, doesn't matter. Corey and Jason at Big Insurance can help you. So we're going to hear from them and we'll be back in just a minute talking about LLCs and how you set them up and what they're good for. Do you need them? So see you in just a second. Birmingham Insurance Group is a full-service property and casualty insurance agency laser-focused on risk management solutions in the single-family residential space. Their master policy program is available in all 50 states and was designed by investors for investors. It provides tailored coverage and competitive premiums, specially for real estate investors, owners, and property managers. Give Jason or Corey a call today at 205-682-8856 or visit them at their website, bhaminsgroup.com. That's BHAMINSGROUP.com. Hey guys, we are back with Mr. Bill Walston. We're talking about all things LLC today. And we've just been talking about how a new investor needs to get started with an LLC. First of all, understand you don't have to run out and get one today. If you're new, learn how to buy houses first. Get some assets and then protect them. Okay. You may find out you don't like talking to sellers. You don't even like real estate. And if you're in California, you don't want to have dropped $800 on a new LLC and decide 6 months from now, hey, I don't even like this stuff and I'm going to get out of here. So buy some houses first. So we're talking about LLCs. We talked about how to set one up, the basics for doing. That's really a pretty simple process.
It is.
And that most people can do. I'll tell you guys, this is no secret. I have a 9th grade education, and I've formed every LLC I've had. There have been a bunch of them. I got started with Bill Bronchick's LLC and corporation course, and he stepped me through what to do. And back then, you had to mail stuff in. It wasn't easy like it is today. I formed LLCs and corporations and minutes and put each, and this is my advice. I don't know what you think about it, Bill, but when you set up an LLC, get you one of those little 1-inch 3-ring binders.
Yep.
And everything goes in there, and that's the ABC LLC, and the next one goes on the shelf, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Yep.
And
now we do that digitally. Okay. There's still some people who want it in paper.
Right. That's
but
right.
we now we do it digitally unless we have to have something notarized, and we get it notarized and scanned. All right. But you're absolutely right. And I love the fact that you mentioned minutes, right? A lot of people stop with they at least have a operating agreement, right? But then they stop, and they also need to have annual minute, at least
Mhm.
annual, some
Right.
more frequently, but at least annual minutes. And
Mhm.
again, we're getting to, well, my state doesn't require that. We know it doesn't, right? But just because it doesn't require it doesn't mean you can't have it. And
Mhm.
in fact, should have it,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the continuation of showing that you're running your business as a business, you're treating it as a business. And man, there's so many things that you can document with minutes that are tax deductible, right?
Mhm.
And shows your tax deductible or your tax deduction intent. Okay. So for instance, let's say that you have a LLC and your spouse is on the board of advisors and you decide to have your annual meeting in Honolulu. You document
Mhm.
that in the minutes that that's why you're there and that's what you're doing. And you had the annual meeting and here are the minutes to document this is what we did type thing.
Right.
Okay. You would be amazed at how far that goes in helping you substantiate deductions that you're wanting to take on your tax return. Again, one of my favorite expressions, and you alluded to it earlier, it's a moot point unless you get audited,
That's right.
right? Moot point unless you get audited. So the other thing that you want to do as a good business person is decrease your chances of audit
Mhm.
as much as you can. But these are all good ways to do that. LLCs definitely help it.
And especially, I'm telling you, you need to be detailed in this stuff, especially if you're aggressive in your deductions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
And
very aggressive.
I'll tell you, I use this every time we talk about taxes and deductions that, my favorite line is from that movie with Tom Cruise and Gene Hackman, where, Tom Cruise said, how many laws do you want me to break? And Gene Hackman said, I don't want you to break any. I want you to bend them as far as you can right
Before they break.
before they break.
Yep.
And that's the way, and that's how I want my tax advisor to be too. I want them to be okay with that because, in the beginning, you're looking at H&R Block. I mean, but listen, I know what it's like when you get started and you walk in there with your 4 files and your 4 properties and they look at you like you have 2 heads. They don't know what to do. It's going to take you a while to find your person unless you call Bill and he can recommend. I don't think Bill's doing tax returns anymore, but
I
he
don't
can.
do returns. I do the strategy, but I know people.
Right. But he knows people that does. So and just cut to the chase on that stuff because these people can save you so much money,
Absolutely.
way more than you pay them, because they know what investors do and they know how to set things up. Where if you want to go to Honolulu for your annual meeting, you
Yep.
can. Okay.
Absolutely can.
Everybody wants to go to Honolulu for their annual meeting,
Right.
or
Or Gatlinburg
Malta
or Gatlinburg or
yeah,
even Florida, Disney World in Florida. I mean, there's so many different things
that's
that you
right.
can do. One of my favorite expressions is living a tax deductible lifestyle.
Mhm.
Okay. And there are ways that you can set that up. All it does is take planning. Does that mean you will pay absolutely no taxes whatsoever? No.
Right.
Okay. But you will pay as little as you have to.
And that's what we're all trying to do. Okay. You have to pay
We
what
can
you
really get
owe.
on a soapbox about that. So we'll kind of talk about LLCs again.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, back to LLCs. We're venturing over into taxes now. We
That's
can
right.
do that another time. But
Call me crazy.
okay, let's say I live in Colorado. And I have heard Wyoming LLCs are the thing to have. I want you need to form all your LLCs in Wyoming. Okay. Is that worthwhile for
No.
me? If it is,
In
why?
fact, it's not even feasible.
Mhm.
Okay. And I have nothing but respect for a Wyoming LLC. Have a
Mhm.
Wyoming LLC. But I suggest to my clients, if you're going to have a Wyoming LLC, you have it as a holding company.
Mhm.
Okay, so you can have a Wyoming LLC set up to own all your baby LLCs, all these other LLCs that hold properties and stuff. But the difficulty we have with an LLC, my firm belief is if you are holding a property and you're going to hold that property in an LLC, then the LLC should be either formed or registered in the state where the property is located.
Mhm.
Because let's say that you have a property in Florida, okay, and that property in Florida is owned by what Florida considers to be a foreign LLC, a Wyoming LLC or a Tennessee LLC or something like that, if they are not registered to do business in Florida, did you know you can't go to court and adjudicate any cases in Florida? You can't protect that LLC, that property in Florida.
Right.
Okay, because you don't have the right to do business there. So my thing is that if you're going to hold property in LLC, and I don't even always recommend that, right?
Right.
But if you're going to, then the LLC should be formed in the state where the property is located. So either one or two things: don't own property in California, right? Or figure out some other way to hold it than in an LLC formed in California.
Okay. So what you're saying, because we hear arguments about this all the time. Well, this is a way to get around this or do that. If I live and buy property in California, then I'm just forced to deal with this $800 a year renewal fee on these LLCs. It's not going to do me any good to go to Wyoming, use a Wyoming LLC, buy property in California, because if I get sued, it's not going to help me anyway.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if somebody tells you, says, "Oh yeah, you can get a property in California, or you can get a Wyoming LLC, and it can hold all your California property, and you don't have to worry about paying any of the franchise tax in California," they are lying, or they don't really understand California tax laws. Because if California gets hold of that, they're going to get you anyway. Okay. So are there ways to get around having to pay for a LLC to own all the property in California? There's a way, yeah. Okay. But it's not by using a foreign LLC.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like something you need to consult your tax advisor on.
Absolutely.
For a private consultation.
Right. Because California doesn't like that, because they basically, then what you're trying to do is get around paying any tax in California and stuff. Right. Because if the Wyoming LLC, you would still have to report in California because the property is located in California. Right. The income is earned in California. So California has nexus. So you're going to have to report that income to California. Well, how do you report the income to California? You're going to have to file a tax return. How do you file a tax return in California? You're going to end up having to register your LLC.
Right. Okay. So back to taxes just briefly. If I operate as a sole proprietor, and I'm telling you guys, you wouldn't believe how many people do this. We talk to, when we're in Sierra Vista right now, when we first got here, we saw a sign, "We buy houses." And I always call them. This guy answered the phone. We talked for about 20 minutes. This guy knows absolutely zip about creative finance. I was asking him about, creative type situations, taking over payments. He didn't know what I was talking about. I was nuts. The only way I've got to pay 60 cents on the dollar or less. I said, listen, you ever run into people that the house is worth $250, they owe $240? Do they ever call you? He says, yeah, once in a while. I said, do you ever buy them? He said, no, I can't make any money. I said, can you call me if you get some of those leads? He said, how are you going to make any money? So it was an interesting conversation.
But trust me, I'll make money.
But my point is, all this guy knows is buying cheap, fixing, and selling. And he's been doing it, I think he told us, for 12 years. I mean, a while. Wow. But that's all he knows. Now, we looked him up, and they are using an LLC. But then we talked to another guy this past weekend who owns, I think it was 27 properties, all in Joe Smith. No trust, no LLCs, no nothing. So a lot of people do that. But back to my point, if I operate as a sole proprietor, I'm going to pay X taxes or whatever based on my income because I have no entities. If I form an LLC, is that going to change anything? Is it going to save me any money?
Yeah. Here's an interesting thing. I talk to people and I say, well, why do you want to form an LLC? Well, I want to save on taxes. I said, well, an LLC is not going to do that for you. Here's the interesting thing, guys. LLCs don't save you taxes. the structure that you choose, the tax election that you make for that LLC is what will either save you or cost you in taxes, right? So here's the thing with an LLC. A single member LLC, okay, is going to default to a tax of sole proprietorship. You can elect a corporate structure as a single member, right? The default is a sole proprietorship. You can elect a corporate structure, whether it's S Corp or C Corp, either one. You can choose to be taxed as either one with a single member LLC. With a multi-member LLC, 2 or more, okay, the default tax election is a partnership. That's how it's going to be taxed. If you don't choose another type of tax election with a multi-member LLC, you're going to file a 1065, a partnership tax return, if there are 2 or more members, period. You have no choice. Okay, you can elect to have a multi-member LLC taxed as a corporation with either a C Corp or an S Corp election, right? So the structure that you choose is going to be what saves you or costs you in taxes. So as you said, a single member LLC is automatically going to be taxed as sole proprietorship, period. Okay. That means if you own properties in that LLC, if you are a wholesaler, then your income and expenses are going to be reported on a Schedule C, which is the most highly taxed business return that there is, or form, I should say, because it's not a return, highly taxed form that you have, or your other option is to do a C or S corporation.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's say, again, I'm that newbie investor. I just formed an LLC, and I totally screwed it up. I didn't elect anything. It just went to the default. I can change that at any time before I file.
Before you file your first tax return,
Right.
absolutely can. Absolutely can. The election is made when you get ready to file. And I know a lot of people worry about, oh my gosh, you know, my accountant told me I had 3 months to be an S Corp and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not true in the first year. Okay. In the first year, we can retroactively make that election to cover the whole year. But yes, the election is made at the filing.
Okay. So you can fix it.
It can be fixed.
Not too late. Okay, great. So we can screw everything up here just like with most things, and fix it.
And there's always a fix. Some things that you can't fix as well. Everything can be fixed. Okay. It just may not be able to be fixed retroactively for some things and stuff like that. But for an election, and in fact, when this is interesting, let's say you're a wholesale dealer, right? You know you're a wholesaler. So you're going to be subject to self-employment tax on your income, however it's taxed, right? And you may or may not know that if you report that income on a Schedule C, which is the default for a single member LLC, you're going to pay self-employment tax on everything above $400, right? 15.3% in addition to ordinary income tax. Okay. For an S corporation, remember that those earnings, they will flow over from a K1 onto your personal tax return, but S earnings are not subject to self-employment tax. You don't pay 15.3% tax on those. So everybody says, oh yeah, my accountant told me to be an S corporation because I'll save on self-employment tax, right? And that's true, okay? But generally we don't worry about a client making what we call an S election until they are making $50,000 or more net income, because it's just not cost feasible, because you have an extra tax return and things of that nature. So until you get to about 40, 50,000 bucks net operating income on your Schedule C, I tell most of my clients just stay a Schedule C person for wholesalers.
Right. Okay. So what about people that do lease options or other creative type things out there?
Okay. Lease options, you actually move over into like being a landlord, rental properties.
Right.
So if you are a single member LLC and you have defaulted to the C election or the personal tax return or the sole proprietorship type form. If you have any income that is subject to self-employment tax, like wholesale income, that's going to go on a Schedule C. All of your rental properties, things of that nature, they get reported on a Schedule E form, which is the old way of if you held the property in your own name. Basically, it's treated like you're holding the property in your own name, if you think about it that way.
Right. Okay. All right. Another thing that, and we're really trying to cover the basics on LLCs and some of the things that Bill and I have both seen recently on Facebook and some other places that have been talked about. And Bill brought up something this morning. He used the term equity stripping. I don't like that. I think that sounds really negative. Equity stripping has always been something they used, a judge would use, or something in the court when you basically you either took rental income and didn't pay the mortgage payment or things of that nature, which is illegal.
Yes.
But we're talking about a way to use an LLC. I just call it advanced asset protection.
That's right. And that just makes it sound better.
Right. It does. Advanced asset protection.
I call it legal equity stripping.
Okay. Legal. Okay. Same thing. So let's say in this scenario, you've got a property that's free and clear. Now, if you were to get somebody that decided they wanted to sue you and their attorney looked up and saw you had free and clear properties, well, they're really licking their chops because there's some stuff to go after. But tell everybody, Bill, how you can use an LLC to protect you in those situations.
Sure. What you do is you set up a separate LLC. Now, this is where Wyoming LLC would be absolutely perfect because they're not expensive to form and they don't have to live, they don't have to be in the state, right? So we typically call that a lending LLC, right? So we have the Wyoming LLC loan to your holding LLC, the one that the property is in, money, right? And then the borrowing LLC, which is you, will give a note back to lender LLC. Money doesn't necessarily have to pass hands because we treat it like a line of credit.
Right.
Okay. Or almost like a HELOC. Right. And so it's just paper documentation that's formed.
Right.
Okay. Can it ever be pierced? You know, that's debatable. A lot of attorneys have said, well, you know, if you peel back the layers, it's just you loaning money to yourself. True. It's just a layer of protection that you would have in there, right? That's what we speak of. That's like a trust. A trust is just a layer of protection to give some anonymity. So what this is it creates on the record a mortgage, okay, or a lien rather against the property. Right. And it's there in case anybody does a mortgage search or a lien search or something like that, it shows up on the books.
Right. And you guys have to remember these things, and it's just like Bill compared this to a trust. Your job in protecting your assets is to put as many obstacles between you and the frivolous lawsuits, which if you're really out there doing harm and someone sues you, then you need to get busted. But I'm talking about the just somebody sees that you have something, they want some of it. They go down to hire Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe does a quick asset search, and they say, everything he's got's fully mortgaged. There's nothing to get here. Okay, I'll sue him for you, but I'm going to need a $10,000 retainer. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to pay it?
Yeah. Frivolous lawsuit goes away.
Yep. And that's the thing about it, right? It's more of we're trying to put layers between us, right, and that potential person who's wanting to screw us. Okay. Right. And the harder it is for us to find, right, to find the true ownership. It's the reason that so many people say control without ownership, right? Control everything, own nothing. Right. Was a way to say it. And so these are just barriers that we learn to put in for asset protection purposes, right? Yeah. And so a trust is the same way. And, you know, there's that I had a friend, when I was learning some trust stuff, he believes very firmly in trust stacking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you can go a little too far with this and carry
Right.
it to an extreme. But, he held all of his property in trust. His beneficiary to that trust was not an LLC.
There's a personal property
Beneficiary to
trust.
the trust was a personal property trust,
Right.
another trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to go into the personal property trust. And you take a look at that. And the way I said it could go an extreme, a personal property trust could be the beneficiary of that trust. Usually he didn't. That's where he would put his LLC beneficiary, right? And the LLC beneficiary, guys, here's a good thing for your Wyoming LLC. There's no reason that your Wyoming LLC can't be the holder of the beneficial interest.
Right.
Okay.
And a Wyoming LLC, now correct me if I'm wrong, does offer the benefit of it pretty much conceals ownership.
Oh, it absolutely does. You
Yeah.
do not have to be listed in the public records. You can be 100% owner of a Wyoming LLC and your name doesn't show up anywhere.
Right. So, if you can find a way to utilize that in your business, like Bill was talking about, as the lender, for your advanced asset protection, for encumbering your properties, or as beneficial interest, for trust or whatever the case may be. That might be
there are a lot of people who come in. Yes, we will set up all your trust and we will set up all your stuff. And, I was talking about you could carry it to an extreme. I think there's some basic things that everybody ought to do, right? But then I think that some of the info given by some of these asset protection salesmen, there's a well-known law firm in Washington State who goes up and says, everybody ought to have this specific asset protection setup, right? And yeah, if you're a millionaire, that probably would work for you. I was examining one for a client the other day that it was way too complicated. The client didn't understand it. Right? If you don't understand it, you shouldn't be doing it, because I can guarantee you, if you try to do something you don't understand, you're going to screw it up.
Right.
That's why I tell these people who try to buy everything with a trust, because somebody says to. I mean, I say to, William says to, but you ought to do a little research and know what a trust does before you try to use it.
Right.
Because if you don't use that paperwork correctly, okay, you're going to mess it up. So you should go to William. You should come to me. Right. And say, how do you guys do this? What are the steps? Like the steps that we gave you about the LLC, right?
Right.
You need to follow certain steps, right? But you don't have to go to somebody who's going to charge you like $15,000 for the year to do stuff for you.
Right. That's for sure. And it's not always about saving money. Some people like to give me grief about doing tabletop closings when I buy Subject2. That started out of necessity. When I moved out of the country, I couldn't do it myself anymore. I couldn't find people in different locations. I had a tight timeline, people in foreclosure. I needed to get something closed. I called a notary to do it and just set up, a float that worked really well.
Yep.
And if the seller's okay with it, then I'm okay with it. Now, have we run into sellers before that said, "What's going on here?
I ain't gonna do that." Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Hey, William, did you find this to be true? Because I did. Speaking of tabletop closes, and then I'm going to digress a bit. We actually the way it got the connotation is that's what we did. We would sit at the kitchen table and we would talk to them, and the way we were taught. I don't know if you were taught this way, but I was taught carry the deed with you when you go to the close, right? When you go to talk to somebody about taking the property, you don't give them a purchase and sale agreement. You haven't signed the damn deed right there. You carry them around in a briefcase.
That's right.
And the reason we called it a tabletop close is that's usually where we were when we did this closing.
Right.
Okay. When I started working remotely, we were not sitting face to face and across from somebody. So we would just tell them, say, well, yeah, I'm going to send these documents over by a notary. Notary's going to run by, set up a schedule with you and get your signature and all that kind of stuff. It went so much easier. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not even there talking to them, but they didn't expect me to pull a deed out and hand it to them, right? People are used to having documents sent to them by a notary or e-sign or DocuSign or what have you, and signing them and sending them back.
Right.
Yeah, so
I
it's
know,
interesting.
I did my first remote closing. It's funny you think about it, but back when I worked locally, but if the seller lived in California or lived in Michigan or wherever it was, and back then, you'd FedEx stuff,
Yep.
and you never met
Or
them
you would
because,
actually fax
oh
stuff.
yeah, fax it or FedEx it, yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
and have bought houses. What has that song? I was country when country wasn't cool.
Wasn't
We were
cool.
doing remote when remote wasn't cool.
That's it.
You know,
They didn't even have a name for it. It's
that's
just
right.
what we did.
Yeah, the seller
But
just lived
we
out of town. I
but
don't
we
know.
digress.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's
So
interesting to compare stuff like that. But that's
yeah,
what newbies need to know, that there are ways that you can get things done,
right.
right?
And it's not always the way that people are used to doing it.
And
Okay.
we know how to teach them that.
Yeah, and that's when I knew I had found the right attorney when I was in Macon. When everything I would run by him, I'd say, Wayne, I want to do this. And he'd go, well, I can't think of any reason we can't. Let's try it and see what happens.
Yep.
He had been an attorney for 50 years and he knew a lot of stuff and he didn't see any reason why we couldn't do it.
Right.
And a lot of these guys now can think of 100 reasons why you shouldn't do it.
Well, their default is no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, that's right. So I advise people when they're looking for a closing attorney to look for the oldest one they can find. I mean, if the older, the better. If he's got a big bushy mustache that's stained yellow from nicotine, all the better, because that guy, he's seen it all. You know what I mean? And he's open to doing a lot of stuff. So absolutely. All right, guys. So what we've got today is forming an LLC. It's an important part of your business strategy overall. But if you're new, it's not something you've got to have today. And have some assets to protect first. Okay. And setting it up is really pretty easy. You need to know a little bit about it. And what would you recommend, Bill? Okay, someone in pretty much any state could probably set up a consultation with you, and you could probably advise them on the steps that they need to take to actually get this thing up and going. And in most states, you could have your LLC set up for, I mean, minus your consulting fee for, gosh, $100.
Yep. I find that the average is anywhere between 100, 150. Okay.
$150.
Yep.
Okay.
Now Tennessee is $300. I know
Right.
that. North Carolina is 100.
But most
Wyoming
states are less.
is 50.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what Florida is, but I don't think it's over 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not extremely expensive
Right.
to get it done.
Right. And the companies that can do it for you, that's great, but they don't take the time to understand your business.
Yeah.
And all of the parts of your, I mean, are they really going to think about how your operating agreement needs to be worded to protect you if you're audited? So
right.
you either need to have an understanding of those things or consult somebody who does. And I can just about guarantee, I don't know, I haven't asked Bill about his consultation fees, but I bet you could call him and have a 15-minute conversation with him or a 30-minute conversation with him and not pay $15,000.
Oh yeah, definitely not
to tell you how to set
$15,000.
stuff up. So how can people reach you, Bill, if they want to talk to you about
they can reach me by email, bill@billwalston.com.
Okay.
Spelled out just like my name there on the screen with a .com after it, or on Facebook. Just friend me, send me a private message.
Right. Bill's in the Sub2 forum. If you're in the Sub2 forum, just tag him, ask him a question, and he can help you out there. Of course, go to billwalston.com and you can reach him there, set up an appointment with him. I'm sure he's got a calendar where he can do something with you there. Hey, man, we appreciate the heck out of you coming on today and talking with us about LLCs. We've had Bill back. We've had Bill on to talk about. We've talked about, gosh, what Dodd-Frank, land trust, LLCs, taxes, and different. And we're going to try to get him back to talk about some other stuff too. We got a whole bunch of topics that we want to.
I'm around, and trust me, I will address every subject.
Okay, awesome.
My,
Okay,
my
Bill.
granny used to say I approached every subject with an open mouth.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon. All
See
right.
ya. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for having me.
All right. Okay, guys, that is it for the LLC topic today with Bill Walston. We appreciate y'all being here with us today. Again, you can contact Bill at billwalston.com or bill@billwalston.com. Send him an email. He can help you get your LLC set up and anything else tax or entity related. Guys, go see our sponsor today, which was Big Insurance. Corey and Jason at Big Insurance. Doesn't matter if you're a rehabber, wholesaler, creative finance person. Hey, and listen, if you do sub-twos, lease options, that sort of thing, we've already trained those guys on how to do the creative stuff. So they know how to handle sub-twos and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, if you're looking for the best coaching at the lowest possible price, check out our $7 coaching. You can go to $7coaching.com and check that out. We'd love to teach you how to do subject to and all those creative things. All right, we appreciate you being here. So until next time, get out there and buy some houses.